In a moment, we are going to share a conversation we got to have with Bernadette Joy. She is a financially free, debt free millionaire who is working in personal finance as a coach, as a mentor, an author, all sorts of things, and is going to jump in to share really, really great nuggets and some thoughts today on self promotion.
So recently, Sammy and I attended Podfest 2025, and you will probably see a lot of people on the podcast here in the next few months that we met there. And she was a speaker, Bernadette Joy, and one of the things that I appreciated. Her session was called Crush Your Money Goals, which is not surprising since that is the name of her book. And she said, before you listen to anybody about finance, you should see their financial net worth. And so she had a screenshot from like an accounts page, like Mint or something like that, that showed what her net worth was and her income for the last year. I was super impressed with that. The other thing is that Oprah recently put her on the top 10 books to read in 2025 alongside some of our favorites, Gretchen Rubin, Mel Robbins. I love Dan Heath. Anyway, there's some stellar big names that are on the Oprah's list, and coming in at number 8 of those top 10 books is Bernadette Joy's Crush Your Money Goals.
And one of the things that I love about her journey, she started out as a human resources generalist and representative. And she does not come from this crazy rich influencer celebrity family. She's not really any different from you or me or anybody listening. And so I love the story that she has to share. And I love the wisdom and the insights that she gives. And we can't wait for you guys to listen. Let us know what you think. And without us pontificating more about this, let's go ahead and jump right in. Bernadette Joy, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm so excited to unpack some concepts about self promotion, your money, all your money baggage, different things like that. We're so excited to just talk and we're going to jump right in. Angela, tell us a little bit more about why you wanted to have this conversation.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned in the intro, I met Bernadette at Podfest recently, and she really did a lovely job. She got to the session early. She was introducing herself to everybody. She was giving out a free course. She was telling us that if we took action right away, then we could schedule an appointment with her. And she just did it so unapologetically,
Hmm.
and, like, I was sitting in the back of the room because I had frankly been in a couple of sessions that I wanted to sit in the back of the room so that I could sneak out, and I was a little grumbly actually to, like, sit up front, and then I was really glad I did because it was amazing. And so I wanted to ask, and I asked the question in the session, and I wanted to continue the conversation here, is how did you get so comfortable promoting yourself? Because
Mhm.
I know the number one thing as an author, and you're published by one of the top 5, and yet still we know that as authors and podcasters, as business owners, a lot of our listeners are family business owners. We know that to really make our business successful, we have to be willing to share and talk about it. So, can you just first talk about your journey of, like, getting comfortable with that, and maybe especially the relatable parts of it, feeling
Yeah.
comfortable. Yeah, start there.
Yes. Well, okay. So thank you, first of all, for coming from the back of the room and saying, because you're right front and center. I stuck you right in the front of the room, and I am really grateful. And now you caught my secret. I get people from out of the back of the room so that they cannot escape. You're gonna have to you're gonna have to awkwardly get up in front of everyone. And the reason that I do that actually in the session, which leads into your question about self promotion, is because I feel very confidently that I will be able to deliver to people value if they're in here, because I want to make sure I respect people's time. And
Mm.
so as a speaker, it really does kind of frustrate me when people kind of show up late. It's clear that they just did the slides like the night before, that they're not introducing like sometimes, especially in these environments like Podfest, where I think it is a very peer-to-peer type of um, conference. I chose actually on purpose to stand not on the stage, but stand on ground level with the whole the whole audience, because I really feel like this is an opportunity. It's a two-way street. It's a two-way dialogue whenever I have a speaking gig. And so I'm glad that you enjoyed the session enough to have me here. And when you asked that question in the session, you asked, how did you get so comfortable with self-promotion? And I gave some short answer of, well, I just was tired of being broke and underpaid and undervalued. I would love to tell you, it's just like one day I woke up and I was just like, I got this and I am so motivated and everyone's going to believe how awesome I am. That never happened. That still hasn't happened. I still wake up every day and I'm like, what am I doing? What is happening? Like the world is weird right now. But I will say some practical steps that anyone can take on that. Number one, I know it sounds like so obvious and everyone said this, but I've just gotten a lot of reps. I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years now. I'm not new to speaking. I'm not new to writing. I'm not new to training. And so I started this journey in 2016 on the personal finance side, but I've been training and speaking in front of people for 20 years now. So what you see here is definitely the result of a lot of reps. But besides that, what I figured out and going to what I said in Podfest to you was that I just learned the hard way that not promoting myself, other people who honestly were less qualified and were not interested in providing value were getting paid a lot more money than me. And so I don't know, call it spite, call it call it vengeance or whatever it is, but I noticed time and time again, and this is going back to not just from when I'm doing personal finance or as an author. I'm talking about when I was in corporate working financial services, when I was in tech, when I was in my MBA program, and my male colleagues thought that they could just railroad me during school projects. Like time and time again, I've had to advocate for myself, and I just learned the hard way that staying quiet and not saying anything at all was hurting me more than it was hurting anyone else.
That's super interesting. The conversation that brings up for me is very ironic, because I often have great advice for people on how they can be good at self-promotion. As a life coach, I do this. And yet we also, as coaches, I say the reason why I'm a great coach is because I am still on the journey, right? But one of my neighbors, who is a middle to late age white male, he's in his 50s. He's not too far, late 50s. So he's probably 5 or 6 years from retirement. And he was finally going to go for a supervisor position. He's very blue collar. And he said, oh, I just don't want to talk about myself. Like if my work doesn't speak for itself, then I just, they should just know. And I said, well, here's the thing. Let's imagine the alternative. Okay. So let's imagine that. And he had told me about the guy that was applying, who was a younger guy that didn't know his, what, from a hole in the ground. And so I said, let's imagine that you are not willing to speak up and tell people about yourself. And that guy is your boss for the next 7 years until you retire. Is it worth it? And he was like, and it was almost it was literally imagining the horrible other alternative that for him. And it was really surprising to me as talking to this middle-aged white guy that he was struggling with it too, because he was just like, I shouldn't have to.
That's
I
right.
shouldn't have to tell them. Right. And so he said, we practiced some of the interview questions.
Yeah.
And this was just my neighbor was calling to catch up and shoot the breeze, right? And we practiced some of the interview questions. He got the job. Not surprising.
Awesome.
He'd been there for 20-something years. And he was like, I couldn't sleep at night thinking of that other guy being my boss. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
And so that's what you're basically saying is, imagine if we have the solution to someone's problem, and if we can't get out of our own way, they go and they buy a lesser course that doesn't solve their problem. They buy it from somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, all the things. And I'm not trying to make it competitive, but basically there's this way that we could think about imagining the alternative and how sad it would be to run into somebody and then going like, I have this problem and I've struggled for years, and you had the solution and you were kind of hiding it.
That's right. That's right. And, I always make the assumption that nobody knows anything about me. I'm not one of those people. I went to a session one time and someone literally said, I know many of you already know who I am. And I'm like, I could never. Like that's a certain level of self-promotion. I'm like, good for you. But I just assume that nobody knows me, which is Which is absolutely true. The vast majority of the world does not know who any of us are, right?
Right.
Even the most famous people.
Even the keynoters at Podfest, I was like, I don't know who these people are. I don't
Yes.
listen
I
to enough
literally had to Google them.
podcasts.
No, no, right? And so it's interesting because we live in this very like celebrity influencer kind of world where we assume that even people who have like large followings or whatever, oh, everyone must know them, and so therefore they must be rich and they must have all this money, and it's just not true. And what I realized in the last year specifically is that even with the perceived success that some people would think that I have, if they followed my journey for a long time, I have like a small contingent of people who've known me since 2016, since my first business, and kind of seen this kind of change in my life. And what I found was that, when people want to go out and do these offers, they're looking for like 100% approval or 100% like and I'm talking about like whether you're a podcaster or a coach or an author or someone in corporate, it's like, unless I know for sure that they're going to say yes, then I'm just not going to try. And the way that I flip the script for a lot of my business coaching clients, because I do an accelerator program where I have businesses that I invest my own money into. And this is the biggest thing I constantly have to coach them on, to say, you're not selling anyone anything. Everyone has their own agency to choose whether or not they want to take you up on what you're offering. So even if they say no, that's still a successful interaction. By the end of this call, by the end of this speaking engagement, by the end of this book, you're going to decide whether or not you want to move forward with me or not. And if you don't want to move forward with me, that doesn't mean you're bad. That doesn't mean I'm bad. It just means that it wasn't for you. And that's okay. But what I found is that when people are avoiding the sale, avoiding the self-promotion, is because ultimately we're avoiding rejection. And
Mm.
rejection is actually an amazing thing. And in my opinion, I actually think a rejection is a great way for you to get quick feedback really quickly. It helps you figure out where you can improve, or it makes you realize, okay, that's not my ideal audience, or that's not my target. And actually, if your non-ideal audience is rejecting you, that's actually a sign that you're on the right path. It only becomes a problem when your ideal person rejects you. And then we're like, okay, there's something we need to fix here, which then, even then, the rejection is like, okay, I know I can do something different next time.
I love this because well, a teeny bit of the long story, but we'll come back around. When I was in college, I ended up with an ad PR double major. I swore to everybody I was never going to follow in my mom's footsteps. I was never going to do marketing. So instead, I did advertising and public relations because that's not marketing.
Cute. I love that.
Very great.
18-year-old us is a very interesting place in
is.
our brains, right?
Teenage Sami was kind of a hoot, but I ended up getting to the point though where I was really frustrated with a lot of my classes, and I wrote my senior thesis about everything wrong with the advertising industry because there were too many times where you were trying to fabricate a problem that people didn't really have.
That's right.
And so I actually wrote like, a 15-page thesis thereabouts about everything wrong with advertising, because when we're trying to create a problem that somebody doesn't have, this is manipulative. I think that is not in the right spot of like ethical marketing and things like that. So when I finally came around and then joined the family business, AKA a marketing agency, I actually in my interview said, I would like to have a conversation about clients that we don't agree with the things that they're selling. And are we okay enough telling people, no, I'm not going to work with you because I don't buy into either your way of doing business or the solution you're trying to sell. And I think and Angela immediately pointed out that she has done that for years. But I go back to that conversation. We have solutions. There are people out there with the problem that we have the solution for. And if you're trying to create a problem for somebody who doesn't have that problem, icky, slimy, sleazy, salesy, that right there is where self-promotion feels wrong. If the question is, hey, do you have this problem? And if you do, I've got something that can help you. And if you don't have this problem, that's amazing. I'm so glad you don't struggle with your money problems, with your business operations, with whatever it might be. I'm so happy for you. Keep me in mind if you run into somebody who does have those problems. I would be delighted to help them. And I think that understanding that we're just problem solvers looking for people with our problem. And if you just stand on your little street corner with like one little sign that says, "Hey, I solved this problem," there's somebody out there who is really struggling with that problem that you're not reaching, that
Mhm.
you could make a big difference for. And don't be a salesman, you can be a problem solver.
That's
Just
right.
find the right people with your problems.
I've gotten over the years, I have made the call that said, "Okay, I know we met and we brainstormed, we got some good ideas, and I told you that today I would send you a proposal. However, today I cannot figure out how to make your cash register ring. And in my integrity, I either want to drive top line revenue or I can help you with your bottom line profit. And if I can't do one of those two things, then we're just not going to do business." And they were like, "Wait, wait, 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 no, 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 but everybody says you're awesome. That we have to have you." And I go, "I know, but I don't get your product and I don't know how to market it and I don't know who's going to buy it." And I'm not saying that that makes your product bad. I'm just saying I don't know.
I'm not the right
And
one.
so I'm
Mhm.
not the right one. And I will tell you that person gave me 5 referrals. I wouldn't
Mhm.
take their money because I told him, I said, "I'm going to take your money. I'm going to have to spend a lot of your money because I can't figure this out. And then you're going to get mad at me and then you're going to fire me. And we're going to skip the you get mad and spend a lot of money. And we're just going to be friends." And they were horrified. And I tried to find him a referral, but I couldn't because I didn't understand who was going to buy their product. But he has sent me 5 referrals over the years within like the first 3 years because he was like, "I'm telling you, if you have a bad idea, she will tell you." And and she ain't
She'll
afraid
be
to tell you.
honest.
She will be
Yeah.
honest. And it was so refreshing to him. Like he was ready to write me a check with 4 or 5 figures in it. And I was not willing to take it because I was just like, no, no, my integrity. And now being in business 20, almost 26 years, that is the thing I sleep at night with.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
And oh,
Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
Angela. I think this might be part of your problem is that you are now pivoting into a new profession area where your offer to people does not directly drive top line revenue or bottom line profit. And so when you are doing business coaching, executive coaching, transition coaching for somebody going from first gen to second gen, you can't tell somebody the dollar amount value that their investment in you will do. And yet, some of your best clients come to you in tears saying, "You changed my life." Change your life is a priceless
Mhm.
result that you in your brain can't put a dollar amount on. So you're like, well, maybe it was a waste of money. I don't know. Why should they spend
Mhm.
money with me? Because I can't tell you if it's going to change their profit or loss.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sorry to
Okay, hang
take
on.
over, but
She's no, that's great. I see the wheels turning on her head. She's like, "Wait a minute, hold
I
on."
literally before this podcast was like, "Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. They're gonna put you in the hot seat. Don't cry, don't cry." That was a dumb thing to say because Bernadette, you were gonna say something.
Well, I don't know the background of what you're describing here, but it sounds like you and I see. Look, we're both like, like,
And
like, something's happening here. Is I'm in a, I can guess maybe I'm in a similar phase as you right now, where I have been for a long time been Bernadette Joy, Crush Your Money Goals, Bernadette Joy. So much so that the book just came out recently, and I said to my husband, I'm debating as to whether or not this is a next chapter, as in I'm going to take this Crush Your Money Goals and expand it further, or if I'm closing a chapter in Crush Your Money Goals and really opening up the next chapter of Bernadette Joy, which is the angel investor, accredited investor, behind the scenes, does not need to be the face of anything. And a lot of people, I love this topic about self promotion because a lot of people assume that I'm like highly extroverted and I love being out in public. No, someone saw me in Trader Joe's last week and they're like, "Were you at Trader Joe's?" And I was like, "No, that wasn't me," and it was so me. Like, and so I struggled a lot with, this is the thing that I should be doing because I'm good at it and because people resonate with it, but does it align with like where I am right now and the kind of clients I want to serve? And so I've had to make some really tough decisions just this past week where I have had to literally right before this call, a coaching client said to me, she's like, "I heard from the other clients that you're cleaning house right now," because I am.
mm,
Uh, and there's been different iterations where I realized that I had a certain offer and they're not following through on the expectations of the offer, i.e., as a coach, we say we agree upon certain things that's going to come for the next meeting, and they show up, they're like, "Oh, I didn't do it." And it's just like, okay, well, one time, fine. 6 times, no, right? And I probably should have stopped it at the third or fourth time, right? And so there's kind of that contingent, but there's also what I realized for myself, I'm turning 40 in a couple of weeks, is that, the next 40 years of my life, I could do this job forever, but I think it's going to be deeper problems to solve, more interesting problems that resonate with my values. And to your point,
Mm.
I had some clients where, not that their businesses were bad or anything, but they just had a different vision for how they wanted to run that business. And I realized I'm not the right person for that. One of them, interestingly, because she's like, well, I don't want to self promote. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know how to help you grow your business if we're not going to tell anyone about your business. So, uh,
Advertising.
so
I
I'm just going to
love when
have to,
people tell me that. That's the
yeah,
answer.
right. And so I'm just like,
Mhm.
I'm just going to have to, I'm going to have to find you someone else. So I had to do a similar thing to you. But I also realized, I shared this story a couple weeks ago where years ago when I first started doing business coaching, I had a client who was just like very much about all of the kind of I don't want to say vanity, but he's like, here's all the awards I won, and I went to this very prestigious school, and just kept iterating on those things and said, I really I'm going to grow this business and I'm going to be super successful and all this other stuff, but then wouldn't do kind of the basics of like what we know is important for a business. Like you need a model, like you need a revenue stream, like you can't just keep telling people that you had all these awards and you went to the school and the people are going to pay you. That's not how that works if you don't have an
Shock.
offer, right? And two coaching sessions in, so it was interesting. He had the opposite issue. He was like all about self promotion and no,
No
and no,
sustenance.
Oh.
no business product or service. He was like, I think I could just get by on pure self promotion. And 2 sessions in, I said, I'm going to refund all your money, which was a lot of money. And I said, you need to go to a therapist instead. This is not it. And of course he was like, whatever, right? And a couple weeks later, he messaged me and he said, I just wanted to let you know that me and my therapist say that you're right.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That takes a lot of courage to actually hear somebody and hear the coaching
Mm-hmm.
and then go for it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sitting here like my brain is because I'm like when people say, "Okay, I want to have my own business, what's the first step?" I'm like the first step is get out of debt because
Mm-hmm.
you have got to reduce your burn rate every month because and create as best of a
Mm-hmm.
safety net as you can. So that's why I'm like sitting there going, "Oh, but Bernadette, don't get rid of all your stuff because that will help our entrepreneurs." Anyway, it's your business. You get to do what you want.
Well, and
Um,
interestingly, about people who are showing up and not necessarily doing the work, I recently have been coached on my own coaching and different things like that, and that money is a lever and a variable. And if I paid $27 to go to a class, and that day I had a bad day and it was like rainy outside and I just want to like curl up and read a book, I'm not going. I'm throwing away $27. It's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
If I paid 2,700, oof, that's a little bit harder thing to throw away. I think I'm gonna really try to make it happen. If I paid $27,000, for me, like that hurts. I am walking there. I am going through the snow uphill both ways. I'm going to make it happen. That number is different for different people in different
That's
parts of
right.
their life. For someone, that $27 is everything, and I'm going to do
Mm-hmm.
everything I can. And it's interesting where money, it's just, it feels more and more made up the older I get. That it just, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
it
just
is.
this
it
mind
is
game.
totally a made up concept.
It's yeah, I tell that to people to all the time. I'm like, money isn't real. It's just a social construct that we've all agreed upon, right?
Right.
So,
And then
and
now it's even like just numbers on a screen. It's
uh-huh,
not even freaking paper anymore. We
I
used to
know.
say it's just little green pieces of paper that we've
It's not
assigned
even that.
value. And you're like, it's not even that anymore. It's numbers on a screen.
Well, going back to Sammy's point earlier of just, people who are fabricating problems in order to then sell them a solution is, in my space. So I teach personal finance, and then I teach how to build an investable business. And what I, found both in the personal finance and in the business coaching world is I think there are a lot of well-intentioned people, but again, not maybe don't have the process to be able to produce a repeatable result. And so a
Mm.
lot of what I coach other coaches on is that if you cannot produce a consistent result, and granted, we'll always have the 20% of clients that just like blow up for whatever reason, right? But if every single thing is turning out completely not what you thought it was going to be, then we have some work to do on how we're delivering that service, which is how Crush Your Money Goals came to be. Like Crush Your Money Goals, the book is simply, 10 years worth. I say simply, it was a lot of work, I guess, but it was simply 10 years of, hundreds of people coming through this program and realizing what worked for the vast majority of people. And a lot of people will say, well, everyone needs to read Bernadette's book, or everyone, it's for everyone because everyone has money problems, right? And I'm like, actually, you'd be surprised at how many people, have a significant amount of debt and they're unbothered. And that's fine. And, I'm not out here to say, like, oh, if you have all this debt, like something's wrong with you and like you should be ashamed of it and all that other stuff. What I teach is specifically for the folks who are bothered by it, who aren't sleeping well at night, and say, well, do you want to do something different? And then on the business coaching side, I do have like an axe to grind with a lot of the kind of coaching world recently, where it is a lot of that. It's a lot of people manufacturing problems in order to sell a solution. And for me, I realized that the specific type of business owner that I want to coach is someone who wants to achieve financial independence at some point. Because there's a lot of business owners who are willing to work 30, 40 years, work until the day that they die, and don't have any other hobbies outside of that business. And they're totally happy with that. And that's great. But the specific kind of business owner that I have says, I love this business, but I also love my family, and I also love traveling, and I also want to do some of these other things. And so how do I make room for that and not have to be in the business every single day? And I really realized that I had to make a really strong distinction on that, because I've had a lot of very successful business owners come to me and they're like, behind closed doors, they're like, my wife is so mad at me right now because I just, I'm at work all the time and we have enough money. Like I did the calculation that you told me to do and we have enough money. So, and some people are asking me like, why am I still doing this? I'm like, I don't know. Why are you still doing this? And again, that's where I'm like, okay, so do you need a therapist or do you need a business coach? Let's unwrap that. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because I don't think I get to have this conversation very often.
I do want to, I'm glad you said calculate the number, because I have been for the last couple of years on my goal list is to achieve my fire number. So for
Mm-hmm.
those of you, I decided this back. I remember I was walking in Nashville and I was like, and I was like, what's that number? What is it called? What's it called? And I look it up and it's financially independent, retire early.
Mm-hmm.
And it has set weird with me that whole 3 years that it's been on my list to like find the number and achieve the number, right? Because, and you shared in your session that so many of your clients don't want to retire. And I have said, I want to continue to impact. I want to have the flexibility. I want to have the freedom. I want to have all those. And so you introduced the fine number. Can you unpack the fine number for us?
Yeah.
Because, oh my gosh, I was like, thank you. This is the number I want instead.
Yes. So, well, practically speaking, it's the same number, but just kind of
Yep.
packaged differently, right?
Sure.
And so what I found, and this is such an interesting, I said this in Podfest, where I have so many people, it happened at Podfest. I was on a podcast and I told people I'm retiring at 40. And they're like, well, I don't know what I would do with, like, I just love my job so much. And like, I just am impacting everybody. Like, I wouldn't quit. And I'm like, who said that I'm just going to like lay around and do nothing? When I said, when I'm going to retire, and I think we have to first talk about the redefinition of retirement, is I'm simply saying financial independence, next endeavor, meaning I have enough money that I can choose to do whatever I want. That's it. Like if I wake up today, like Sami said, I'm like, oh, it's cold outside and I don't feel like doing this, I'm just not going to do it. Like, and like I think we can exercise some of that, early on before we ever hit the fine number. But what I'm finding is that what I think is interesting is I get, again, a lot of people who have enough money and then they don't know what to do with themselves other than make money.
Yeah.
And that to me is scary. And I am the product of that. My father he was forced into retirement into his 70s. Otherwise he would have kept working. My uncle, who is his next brother, they're the only two that immigrated from the Philippines. My uncle is like 80 something and he's still doing taxes. And I asked him one day, I'm like, isn't there anything else you want to do? And he was just like, and his responses, which I get from a lot of people, he's like, well, I'm afraid that my brain is just going to turn into mush. If I stop working, then I'm going to suddenly get dementia and all of that. And I'm like, well, there's other things like pickleball and like learning a new language and karaoke. Like I could name 100 things that would make sure you do not get dementia that doesn't require you to keep working. So I go on this rant to say, I'm glad that resonated with you, this financial independence next endeavor. I realize that retirement is a very interesting word for people. They just immediately assume what we Google. If you Google the word retirement, it's always two older white people on a beach. That's like,
Right.
that's the only picture that comes up with a retirement versus, hey, retirement for me can be living truly in my purpose, and money is not the main reason I'm doing it anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm excited that was
Yeah.
something that you picked up on.
My husband's aunt, she actually retired at she's in her late 40s right now, and she travels a lot. Her daughter has moved across the country, and so she whenever she wants, she just picks up and she goes and visits her daughter. She is also interestingly pouring into our family and my sister-in-law's family in that she's like, I don't have anything to do during the day. When your kid gets off school, they're sick, they have these weird random parent teacher conference days, I'll watch them. Why not? Like, what else am I doing but pouring back into my family's life, my community, all of these things. And it it's not the same picture. Anyway, I love that I have somebody in my life that I was like, I
I love
love that
that.
you are giving back to us in a way that is so helpful. And it's just like, yeah, I'll watch your kids. No problem. You don't have to go find a sitter. You don't have to go do these things. Like, sure,
Hmm.
I'll go back and watch a 2-year-old.
Hmm.
It's crazy.
I had a gal that I met in my nonprofit volunteer life, and she was a school librarian for 30 years. And she's like, Angela, I put in almost as many hours, but when you're a school librarian, there's set number of hours you have to be there. And she said, now I get to choose. And so she's like, the domestic violence shelter wanted to offer text support to people. And so she mans the text phones on one afternoon a week, and then she's in the League of Women Voters, and then she goes, I volunteer now in all the organizations that I've waited my whole life to get to volunteer in, and now I get to give back in a way. So she's like, I'm still working.
Hmm.
It's just I get to work on my schedule, on my time frame, on all of those things. So I'm very delighted to have a few people in my life that are modeling it well. By contrast, I have a friend of mine who I was teasing him lately and said, "Oh, some people retire and take up golf, and you retire, turn 68 and buy a business."
Yeah.
And I said, it's interesting because we all are supportive in that business. He's a client friend, and
Hmm.
we are like, he's more fired up and is more invested. And I'm like, this is your hobby. You realize that, right? Like, he's texting us on the weekends and at night because this is his hobby. It's his retirement hobby. And once we
Hmm.
all in the last few weeks kind of got that straight, then we're like, oh, okay. Well, hey, Pumpkin, we actually like to have dinner with our friends.
That's right.
So we actually like to spend time with our family, and we do like to travel. And he's starting to like have to work into his suit of not everybody works at his pace. And he also
Uh,
feels an urgency too. Like, I have a chance to this one big last chance. It's my last hurrah of buying this business. It's
Mm.
super exciting. And he's just driven in a way that some of us are like, we're in our 50s. We're like want to like have some balance, dude. Anyway, it's
yeah,
been really
yeah.
fascinating to see kind of the opposite cuz he is horrified by the idea of retirement.
Well, and I would also say for myself that where this inspiration came from on retiring early was, simply I watched my father work into his 70s. My parents, I grew up in New York City, and when my father retired, they did not plan enough money for retirement, and they had to move. They had to sell their house and move to Las Vegas to a lower cost of living because they could no longer afford the mortgage in New York City. So part of it was, if I'm being honest, part of it was like, okay, I don't want that to happen to me. So let me make sure I have enough money. And so when people hear, oh, like I'm a debt free millionaire, they're like, oh, you just have all this money to just toss around. And I'm like, no, that money is sitting in retirement accounts, so that I can make sure that I am, safe and
Yeah.
comfortable in my later years. But I was also, my father passed away in 2021. And right before he passed away, I went on a hiking trip with him, and I didn't realize how much he loved hiking. And it was like a shame to me that he only started hiking in his 70s,
Mm.
where for me, I'm obsessed with what your client's obsession with business is. My obsession with Korean dramas and Korean pop music, K-pop. And so 2 years ago, my husband and I went to a K-drama tour. So it's this tour around Korea that was hosted by this K-drama expert, where we go to all the filming locations. Imagine all your favorite shows and you get to go to the filming locations, right?
Wow.
And I was like over the moon. So I was so happy that whole week. Me and my husband were by far the youngest in that group. Everyone
Yeah.
was in their, 50s, 60s, 70s in there. And there were certain parts of it that were challenging. Like we had to literally climb up a mountain to go see this random, very iconic location, right? And so I turned to my husband, and so many of them on that trip said, it is so great that you and your husband are doing this together and doing it while you're still younger, because this is hard for us now. And so I would love to say that I have this, again, grand vision of oh, I achieved fire because I have all of these amazing things I want to accomplish in the world. I'm like, actually, part of me just wants to live my life and go watch K-dramas all day and not feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
So,
I
I've
love
said it
that,
my
and
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sammy.
I love that, and I noticed we have 30s, 40s, 50s represented here on this call, and I just recently have started trying to try a smattering of different hobbies. And so I feel like I have not done a great job of developing what do I actually enjoy doing outside of work. And so I am now in an experimentation phase, and I picked up embroidery. I was at Podfest and I was sitting there with my embroidery
I
hoop,
love that.
and somebody was like, "Oh, is your podcast about embroidery?" And I was like, "Nope." And they were like, "Oh, what's the embroidery about?" And I said, "Rebellion." And they were like, "What?" And I was like, "It's creating for the sake of creating. And when I'm done with this, I'm going to put it in a box and no one's going to see it and I'm going to be done with it." But that right there is an act of rebellion for me, that I can just do something that's not going to make me money, that's not going to add value to the universe, that I can just do something because it is fun and enjoyable. And for some people, that might be rebellion. And if you are listening right now and you're like, I don't know what my thing is, I don't know if it's K-pop or embroidery or travel or whatever, start trying things, because you have a hobby in you and you have other things outside of work that aren't work. You can make an impact or not, or you can just enjoy life for the sake of enjoying it in an act of bold rebellion, and let that be what it is. So
you're the most unrebellious, rebellious person, which is awesome. I love that.
what's funny,
Embroidery is
going
rebellion.
back to teenage Sammy thought she would be rebellious, and I painted Bible verses on my bedroom wall because I didn't get permission to paint on my bedroom wall. Ha ha! Take that, Mom.
And I love you, Jesus. Great. That's awesome.
Oh my gosh.
That's awesome.
I'm definitely the least rebellious person out there.
Well, I think though the idea of those longtime listeners are like, oh yeah, but wait, how many times have we talked about Sammy's recovering perfectionism? And as a perfectionist, like you and an achiever who likes to achieve, then you to do something.
It is bold rebellion.
It is rebellion.
Absolutely.
Just to say, I'm just
Absolutely.
doing this to figure out if it's enjoyable or not. And figure out if I like doing puzzles, figure out if I like painting, we did ballroom dance a couple of years ago because I love to dance. My husband was terrible at it. And come to find out, he was terrible at it because he was so nervous and his nervous system would just freeze up. Well, then if you take about 15 or 20 ballroom dance classes, then he he did it enough times that he got relaxed into it. And now when we travel and we go to we are not winning any awards. And our instructor was like, y'all never going to compete, right? You just don't take it seriously enough. And I'm like, we don't, but we now have this thing that just that one season of taking those now has enriched my life dramatically. So he is so easy to jump on the dance floor and he's relaxed on the dance floor and we are silly. And I've tried to tell him for years, the only reason you're a bad dancer is because you don't relax into it. And now tango, I say on the podcast all the time, you have to tango with grief, because tango is the only ballroom dance that sent me to the chiropractor.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much about communication, everything. Anyway, I say, please, please, please try hobbies And you don't have to love them. You don't have to stick with them forever. You don't have to like have a
Well,
little round
may
of
I
love.
add on that? Is
Yes,
that
please.
is that's actually part of what I talk about when I talk about in Crush, the R stands for reverse into independence, and part of that is calculating the number, the fine number. It's 25 times your annual expenses, but the other half of it, and I tell people, is exactly what you just said. I want everybody who's listening to this to start practicing retirement now. So that's what I tell people, is that when I'm doing hobbies, I'm just practicing retirement. Like, what would I be doing if I didn't have to work every day? And so I told y'all earlier, right now, last night I've been taking improv classes, and it scares the crap out of me every time I go, because it's just so outside of my comfort zone to just say exactly what's going on in my mind, which can be a very scary place for people. And you always think that you have to be funny. And so that's a new hobby that I have right now, that I'm like, maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. And then today, right after this, I'm taking my swim lessons,
Yes.
and I told people, and this is what I think is hilarious about everything that we do. Me, I'm a personal finance, business coach. I'm always trying to be up on my Instagram and my podcast, being like, I have all these great gems for y'all. I wrote one day, I just said, I'm starting swimming lessons. My goal is to learn how to swim before I turn 40, and I'm terrified. And that was the most engagement I've gotten on any post I've ever done.
Of course it is. It always is those
Right?
days.
Always.
In my entire career. And I realized that the reason that probably resonated with so many people is because everyone has something that they always wish they could do, but they never made the time for.
Mm.
Or they don't think they have the money for. And so initially I made the excuse of like, oh, swimming lessons must be really expensive. It's $70 for 8 weeks at my and so I was like, oh, this is not a money issue. But it would be a time issue for a lot of people, because my swim lessons are 11:15 on Thursday mornings. So a lot of people usually have to work during that time. And so I finally said to myself, like, I cannot go for another 40 years not knowing how to swim. One, for survival. Like I've watched Titanic like a dozen times. I'm like, I will survive if that happens, but also, just the joy when I see, when I go on vacation with my friends, because I do like to travel, and I'm like, nah, y'all go in the water, like I'll just stay behind. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. And
Yes.
that's such a analogy for life, where I see other people enjoying things. I don't want to be the one standing behind and just like watching everyone play in the water. Like, I want to be in the water with them. So everyone, think about the thing that it doesn't have to be productive. It doesn't, like Sami said, it doesn't have to turn into like your next business. You can just decide to try it and say, okay, I tried it and I liked it, or I tried it and I'm not ever going to do it again. And now you know.
And to bring us back up the rabbit trail, this right here, if you are still afraid of self-promotion, these are the things you're missing out on. These are the kinds of things that you are going to shortchange yourself on if you are still too afraid to tell somebody that you have a solution. Maybe they have the problem to match your solution. And don't be that person sitting on the boat, not hanging out and not jumping in. At some point you'll have to decide it's more painful to sit here and watch other people than it is to just jump in and figure it out.
Ugh.
I see what you did there. Good job.
I love it. Bernadette, we love to ask our guests, do you have anything you'd like to leave our listeners with? Any sort of like last thoughts, advice, encouragement?
Yes. Well, first of all, I've so enjoyed this conversation. So thank you for having me. The thing that's kind of swirling in my head right now that I'd like to share is, I was so grateful when Angela said, oh, she's just doing this so smoothly, and all of she seems like she has all her stuff together. And the byproduct of me self-promoting was that this post Podfest, I've had 20 people sign up for one-on-one discussions, and vast majority of them will never become clients of mine. Right. And that wasn't the intention. The intention was, I want to hear what's going on with other people. And I was really grateful that so many people who set up time with me, they wanted some encouragement. They wanted some advice. And 5 years ago, I would have been the business coach. It's like, if this is not leading to a closing deal, if this is not leading to any sort of like partnership or sale, like, it's not worth your time. But because I am in the financial position and in the energy and time position to be able to just meet with people for the sake of meeting with people and like connecting with another human being, I just ask the listeners to continue to support podcasts like this, which encourages the human connection. And today, this week, reach out to someone that you might not have otherwise reached out to and just have a human to human connection. It doesn't have to go anywhere. It could just be like, I met an amazing person today and I'm really glad that they're doing well.
Mm, that is so, so good. Thank you, Bernadette. Where can people find you? Where can they find your book, you, all of the things?
Yeah, so my website is crushyourmoneygoals.com. That is where you can find the book, other resources, if you ever do want to coach with me at some point. And then on social media, I'm primarily on YouTube and on Instagram at Bernadette Joy, spelled with the word debt. So it should be easy to find me.
Ah, I like that. Very clever. Thank you guys so much for listening. We hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. And if you have any thoughts, you can send us a text message. You can email us. You can do all the things. Find those notes, those hints for how to do that in the show notes. And until next time, we hope you guys go be freaking awesome. Oh my goodness, Bernadette Joy. That was such a great conversation that we had. I'm so glad that you followed up and that you were somebody who took advantage of opportunities and reached out to her and then even replied late back to an email. That was serendipitous. I just love it.
Well, and I shout out to you for coming up with a better podcast topic than I did, because one of her kind of elements of crush your money goals, the H is healing your money story, which relates to some podcast episodes we got going floating around. Then and so, but I think yours definitely took your idea took us in a better direction and a little bit
Well,
deeper.
it was your idea because that's what you had followed up with her about was, "I want to talk more about self-promotion," and she said, "Let's do a podcast about it." And then I think that I appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable and to put your messy middle up to say, there's so many people who look at you and are like, "Oh, extrovert Angela and everywhere, and you have all this network and everything. Of course you don't have a problem with self-promotion." I appreciate your willingness to say, "Sure, yeah, I don't have a problem with that," winky face,
Winky
um,
face, yeah.
and just to put that sort of forward. Risk that you might cry on the internet, whatever it might be.
Wouldn't be the first.
Probably won't be the last.
I probably won't be the last.
What what stands out to you? What are you gonna be taking away from this conversation?
Well, it was interesting because I teach people a lot about how to self promote, and it was nice to be able to give my own self a preaching to, you know.
Mhm.
I think it's one of those things like we need a reminder. Big aha, though, you caught in the episode of that my business for the last 15, some would argue 26 years, is about how do we drive top line revenue or bottom line profit. And when you're doing executive coaching, especially on the generational change, that number is much harder to measure. Like I've literally said to clients, if we do this thing, I expect that you will get this return in this number of months. You should get your money back in X number of months, and you should be able to see an increased return in, and so then it will just keep building from there. And so knowing that is like, feels like the Rubik's Cube just opened up to me.
And I feel like it's not a waste of an investment if you're not going to exactly see your dollars back to you. You know what I mean? To If somebody could say to you, "Hey, I have the skills that you can have a better relationship with your child," that if you in this journey were talking to 5 to 8 years ago Angela and said, "Hey, as you go about this journey, you know that one of the side benefits is that you and your youngest daughter are going to become really good friends. What dollar amount is that worth to you?" That is not a good question to ask. And yet that outcome is an outcome you have currently experienced and can't quantify it. And so that's
Yeah,
okay to have unquantifiable outcomes.
and it's interesting because I was just recently having a conversation with somebody that had gotten a couple of certifications back years ago, and at the time it made sense to get the certification. They didn't execute in exactly the same way that they thought. It was real hard to measure. Did we get a return on that
Mm.
investment? And then now the business has shifted again. And because of that certification, they get to add value in a very different way than what was originally imagined. And so it's like the difference between like a literal direct relationship and this kind of squishy indirect relationship of the value that we offer. And I mean, golly, there's people that I get a text message and it's like, you don't understand. I actually feel bad for my siblings who don't work in the family business. They don't have these hours and hours of wisdom with my dad. And even though we've argued and we fought, we worked through it, and we're closer than the siblings that don't work in the business. And I couldn't do it if you hadn't coached me and helped improve that relationship. And you're right. It's super hard to quantify.
Mhm.
And I here's the other thing. It's also super hard to clearly price it.
Mhm.
I'm struggling. I think I'm also struggling a little bit with the pricing of it because of that, because I can't see the direct value. And so then it's like, okay, well, I got to make it worth my time. Or, but then, and then
You
when
gotta
you say
figure out
yes to one thing, you say no to other things, right?
and what is the dollar amount, like I talked about, that's the variable to get them to commit, because when
Yes,
you're saying, "Yes, I'm gonna coach you and I'm gonna invest in you," sure, the client is paying you money, but you are giving your wisdom and your time, and you not to out you with a problem, but you do a lot where you sell your shower brain time and your drive time brain. And you don't even realize that you sell that sometimes, but you're like, no, I'm
right,
going to noodle on your problem. If you're not committed to this in the way that I will commit to it, I'm moving on to somebody else who's going to commit to it. And money is a lever to indicate how committed to change are you. It's not
right,
the lever, it's not the only factor in an equation, but it is something to consider. And so I love
100%.
that. I think this could be a game changer for you. This little insight.
That insight is huge, and which will be hard to pick apart because I've already said that the last week we spent in podcast or in Podfest, literal giant quantum leap. And it will be very hard to quantify why, but it will be because of these relationships we made, and it will be insights that we had and some learning. And it's such a complicated thing, but literally leveling up our
And
business.
it'll be both those relationships and really intangibles, and then the other, like, oh, we added thumbnails to our YouTube now.
Right.
Like,
We're
yep, and we
doing
started
this little
doing that.
thing where we do the intro and outro, without the guest,
Yes. So
which
anyway,
yeah.
I I don't know. I don't know that I have any singular takeaway from the episode. We didn't talk about it on the episode, but I always love somebody who's pretty critical of Dave Ramsey, as Bernadette is on her Instagram. I think I came of money age in the time where everybody was sort of like, wait a minute, maybe this isn't the best idea and way to approach things. And maybe some of these tips don't help people build generational wealth. And so I think that I'm like, yeah, I was caught that wave right as it was happening. And I don't know. There are things to rethink about sort of traditional ways to view saving money, paying off debt, and, waiting until you can pay 20% for a house just because you don't pay PMI is not actually the financially best thing for you to do, because your home is going to increase in more value than it is in the time it'll take to save you 20% in certain places.
I
Anyway,
know. Yeah,
things like that.
it's awesome.
So I love the relationship. I'm so grateful that you brought Bernadette on, and we really hope that you guys go follow her. Follow her on Instagram, follow her YouTube, buy her book. It's going to be really good. It's going to be something that will really change your life and change how you view money things and make a difference for you. If you're not already subscribed to our newsletter, you should go do that, because, as we said, we have quantum leaps of jumps of how things are going to be improved and the value add. There'll be new insider tips, behind the scenes stories, extra things going on. So if you're not already subscribed to our newsletter, that should be your very next to do. I really, really encourage it. You're not going to regret it. And maybe that'll be the thing for you that changes everything. The little trajectory shift is getting that in your inbox.
And if you don't know how to subscribe to our newsletter, you can go, of course, to our website, the letter B, freakingawesome.com. If you are on Spotify, you can click text us. You also, if you are personal friends with us, and you send us a text, a Facebook Messenger, a carrier pigeon, an Instagram DM. We don't care. Just say, hey, I'm lazy. Give me on that newslettery thing. I don't care. Just wave your hand. If you see me at Walmart, say, put me on your newsletter. Any way you want to get on there, super easy. We will help you.
I love that. It's also not just if you're on Spotify that you can text us. Anywhere you're listening, it should be in the show notes that you can click a button and send us a text. This is a new feature. We really want somebody to try it out. Maybe we'll have a prize for the first person who sends us a text. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Until next time, we hope you guys go be freaking awesome.